Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to dig into a pretty gruesome horror story from the 16th century, all about a werewolf. But, this isn't just a scary story. It's actually a doorway to a really radical and, honestly, a pretty unsettling idea about what good and evil even mean. All right, let's just dive right into the deep end with the chilling conclusion to the story of a man named Peter Stump. Because as we're about to see, this particular take on the legend paints him as something much more than just a monster. It paints him as a terrifying new kind of man, a Superman. So first up, a legendary monster. We're talking about the historical Werewolf of Bedburg. And let me tell you, the legend itself is, well, it's pure nightmare fuel. For a whopping 25 years, a German farmer named Peter Stump supposedly stalked the town of Bedburg. The story goes he could turn into this vicious wolf, and he did just unspeakable things. Murder, cannibalism, the works. So yeah, it's the kind of story that's been told around campfires for centuries, right? But what if it's not just about a monster? Today, we're looking at a very specific interpretation that completely reframes this horror story. It turns it into this dark, bleak parable about freedom, about morality, and about power. Okay, next section, the man beyond good and evil. And this is all about a fundamental conflict of values. See, this philosophical reading, it says Stump was way more than just some simple villain. It frames him as a man who made a very conscious, very deliberate choice to just step outside of everything we'd call normal human morality. And that right there creates a massive conflict. And this is where things get really interesting. This perfectly lays out that central conflict we were just talking about. On one side, you've got the herd. Think of it as the collective, all about comforting lies, a kind of safety and weakness. And on the other side, the Übermensch, the Superman. This is all about terrifying freedom, creating your own values, and finding strength in will. So let's talk about the prison of herd morality. I mean, how can virtue become a cage? Let's dig into that first side of the conflict, the side of the villagers. How does this interpretation actually see the morality of the very people who ended up hunting Stump down? Well, from this perspective, the villagers' moral code, it's not seen as some sign of pure goodness. Nope. It's what the philosopher Nietzsche called slave morality. And the idea here is that it's a system created by the weak, not to be truly good, but specifically to hold back and restrain anyone who's strong. And this really gets to the heart of how Stump supposedly saw their world. He wasn't looking at a righteous community, no way. He saw people who clung to these comforting lies, who were totally confined by their own moral code. To him, their virtue was nothing more than a camouflage for their cowardice. Their entire morality was just a prison they'd built for themselves. All right, let's flip to the other side, the will to power. This is about Stump's pact and his transcendence. So, if he totally rejected their world of comfort and safety, what did he choose instead? What did he embrace? Well, according to this parable, everything Stump did was driven by one single, overwhelming force, the will to power. It's this core human drive to achieve and assert your own power. So his pact with the demon Mephistopheles, it's not seen as this desperate fall from grace. It's actually framed as the ultimate expression of his ambition to get power no matter what it took. Exactly. He wasn't looking for salvation. Not at all. He was trying to completely shatter what he saw as the shackles of human frailty. He wanted to become something more than just human. He wanted to be a creature of pure, raw, unfiltered will. And that transformation leads us here, to the freedom of the beast, forging a totally new existence. Because that pact, that grab for power, it wasn't just about being powerful for the sake of it. It was about getting to a state that this parable calls absolute, terrifying freedom. And for 25 years, this is supposedly how he lived. You can almost see it as a kind of philosophical journey. First, he embraces the abyss. He consciously throws out herd morality. Then he transcends human frailty with his pact. After that, he just acts on pure instinct and desire. And finally, the last step, he creates his own values, making himself totally free from anyone else's judgment. And that really is the heart of his transformation in the story. He wasn't just breaking the village's rules. That's thinking too small. He was playing a completely different game with a rulebook that he wrote himself. In his mind, he was living the only truly authentic and free life possible. Which, of course, brings us back to the end of his story. His capture, his confession, and the truly chilling core of this whole interpretation, him being condemned for being free. What was his true crime? So here it is. This is the big twist in this whole interpretation. The parable argues that the villagers didn't kill him for murder or for cannibalism. They killed him because of what he represented. His real crime was freedom. Think about that. He was basically a walking, talking, breathing rejection of their entire way of life. He showed them the terrifying freedom of the beast, and they just couldn't handle it. They had to destroy him, if only to prove to themselves that the bars on their own cage were safe and good. And that's how, in this wild, dark parable, Peter Stump the werewolf becomes the embodiment of the Übermensch, the Superman. He becomes this figure of ultimate strength and freedom, an ideal so powerful that the herd can only respond with fear and violence. They had to eliminate the very thing they were too afraid to ever become themselves. So the story doesn't really give us any easy answers. It just leaves us chewing on this really unsettling question. If morality is a cage, even a comfortable one, what does real, true freedom actually look like? And maybe more importantly, is it worth the price?